Hello everyone. Today I will be once more featuring the Montana. I did promise I would feature a bit more of this ship since I honestly hadn't featured it in such a long time. The Hindenburg shot and turned, which is of course a terrible order to do it. You start turning first, then you shoot, so that by the time you're spotted you're already turning into safety. If you do it in his order, it makes it very easy to predict where to fire. The matchmaking is pretty damn nasty. They have 8 tier 10s, they have a Shimakaze, and more importantly, they have a division with 2 Conquerors and a Minotaur. And I can already see the Conquerors pushing up the left flank. So this means I'm gonna have to keep an eye out on this left flank quite heavily. Now, looking at the minimap, you see that my team actually decided, the guys who spawned left, south of A, they have all decided to abandon A entirely. So this of course presents a problem, because if we just straight up flee at this point, they're going to be rushing through A and we're about to be surrounded. You can't allow this to happen. It's okay to allow this to happen if you're already pushing through B or C or already getting map presence elsewhere. But if you're having no map presence and you're giving up a cap, you end up being surrounded in your own spawn. So at this point I start slowing down and I realize I have to start putting pressure on this team that's pushing in from behind us. I can't let the Conquerors just push in completely unscratched, so these are going to become my focus target. I need to slow these guys down, I need to harass them, I need to buy my team some time to get something done on B and C. I have a Yamato and something else that's sadly going towards D, and that happens. It's of course extremely stupid. You shouldn't go D on this map in a battleship because you get so isolated, but it's too late now, they're already going there. So at this point I'm just slowing down and trying to delay them. I did mention in my previous Montana commentary that one of the great strengths of this improved dispersion build is if you run spotter plane, you are very good at firing into smokes. And you can see I track this Minotaur, I can see him firing, and I aim slightly below where his shells are firing from and right between them. This is of course the risk of when you don't shoot volley fire, but you hold down mouse 1 like this guy is doing. You constantly transmit your position, which makes it pretty easy to track down your exact location, and I was able to punish him for it with an early citadel. Keep in mind though that I am almost stopping here, and the reason for this is if you shoot into smokes but you're not locked onto any target, the game won't automatically compensate for your aim. Basically, if you move, if you don't lock onto anyone and you're moving, your aim glides with the ship, because while your ship is moving, so of course your crosshair is moving as well. If you lock onto something, the game automatically compensates. But if you don't, well, especially if you're shooting into smokes, you have to shoot very quickly. Because if you wait even half a second, your aim will have glided past the point you were aiming for, and basically you constantly have to adjust yourself. That's what you have to do. You have to constantly adjust your own aim yourself. I am moving fairly slow. Hopefully I did shoot in time. The Minotaur is still firing and giving way too much broadside, so I might be able to punish him again. And I do in fact score another citadel and a bunch of hits on him. So I've citadeled that Minotaur in the smoke twice. That's without any lock-on, and that's just using the power of the spotter plane. And that is of course the power of the reduced dispersion module, and in general Montana's great firepower and accuracy. It allows you to punish them like that. Now, we are getting D control. If my team is D, it would be smart, they would push straight into C. If my Yamato was smart, he wouldn't even push through that cap anymore, because you can already see we have control of it, and there's nothing for him there. But sadly, it looks like a third of our team is committing to D. So we are facing the full strength of the enemy team here at B. We are being surrounded, and our team, a third of our team is gallivanting around on D where there's no opponents. So obviously we need to kite, we need to disengage, but we also need to do some damage to slow them down. So while I am moving with the rest of my team away from the enemy, I'm still trying to do as much damage as possible on the way, especially since I have a fair amount of health, and I don't mind taking some damage on the way if it means slowing down the enemy on the way as well. But at this point, trying to push towards A, trying to fight them at A simply doesn't work. They have far too much firepower here, and we're still missing this huge chunk of firepower that's currently sailing around on D. The good part is though that one of their Yamato is in a terrible position. He is overextended. As I mentioned often that Yamato is a battleship that excels if you play with your teammates. This Yamato is almost alone. So it's only really a matter of time before this Yamato gets killed off, because you cannot sail around alone, especially this deep behind enemy lines. Well, deep and deep, quite at the edge of our lines, and I expect him to go down at some point. I'm trying to finish off the Moskva, but at these ranges, if you're moving at full speed, any sort of small adjustments can throw your aim off, and unfortunately I get a bounce on this Moskva, which is of course the last thing I wanted, since I want to get this guy killed because we need the points, and I want to get rid of this radar influence as well for the sake of my DDs. We only have 2 destroyers left, and the Shima is off on some adventure, so I only really have 1 DD next to me. The Moskva does slow down and he points nose in, which is something I'll happily take because you can overmatch the nose quite easily. I expect this to be a kill, but Dispersion disagrees and I only get 1 single penetration. At this point I have to start disengaging because, well, we have DDs pushing through. Both the Conquerors have pushed through A at this point, and the longer I sit here, the more the risk of me being surrounded becomes a reality. In fact, most of my team has already disengaged, so I've been kind of serving as the back vanguard, slowing them down a bit more as they disengage. Eugen dies, Yamato dies. Uh-oh, how the hell did that happen? A Conqueror burned down our Yamato. So now we're actually down some ships, but we should be able to get C. The problem is the enemy team will most likely get B in the meantime, because once again we are forced to retreat. We gave up so much ground at the start and the enemy has kind of grasped this advantage and they're pushing through A heavily. Luckily though, the enemy is pushing too much into our spawn instead of chasing us. If that Conqueror division would be chasing us right now instead of pushing into our spawn, we'd probably be in some serious trouble because we'd be surrounded. This squad force kind of locks us down, and if the Conquerors brushed us from behind right now, we'd be in a lot of trouble. But because the Conquerors are not here yet, I can actually slow down. I have a really good position right now. Sure, I'm being shot at by a Minotaur, but 1 Minotaur doesn't really scare me when I'm angled, and I'm able to punish this squad force from an angle he doesn't really expect. He's basically trying to angle for the guys behind the island, and he doesn't expect shells from me. And when you get these kinds of broadsides, you can of course do massive damage to German battleships. I did show this in the previous commentary, just how strong Montana AP is against broadside Gorforce, and this guy is really feeling the pain at this point. I'm also angled enough that if he fires back at me, I will probably bounce all the shells. I'm also angled towards the guys coming from B and A, so honestly my positioning right now is really good. I can support my team's push at C, I can serve kind of as a bait target for the people pushing from behind me, and there's really no risk of anything dealing heavy damage to me right now. In the Des Moines, there's a Des Moines sailing right in front of me. He should probably push to sea as soon as possible, try to support our team there, because he shouldn't stick alone on this flank. It looks like the Conquerors are starting to open up on me. That's perfectly fine. There's a reason I run fire prevention, and that's exactly to deal with the Royal Navy and Conqueror spam that you see in this tier these days. I kill off the Kurfürst, and that means we should be able to secure the sea cap, and I start following my team through to sea now. My Des Moines is disengaging, so I'm just going to follow. I don't want to stay here alone, because if we look at the minimap we can see there's an Ognovoy, 2 Conquerors, a New Orleans, and I think it's a Benson in B as well. So I would end up being alone versus 5 people, because, well, my team isn't really positioning the best way right now. Our Shimakaze is sailing around in enemy spawn, very questionable. He should be helping us stop this push of the Conquerors. He would probably get a lot more damage and rewards for doing it as well, since he could torp tier 10 battleships. But more importantly, my Yamato is disengaging a bit too much. If we look at our spawn, you might see that we have a cruiser in our spawn, but more importantly, my Yamato is kind of like shitting himself right now. He's sailing on I-8 and he's fleeing even deeper. I see the Minotaur, expect him to turn right to avoid grounding and turn into my shells, but the Minotaur apparently has no idea what he's doing, and he kind of out-potatoes me by grounding full broadside into the island. Well, that's one way of dodging, and well, it kind of works out for him simply because there was no one else here to punish him for it. So unfortunate, because that would have been a pretty important kill, because we are still down 1 ship. I'm going to see if I can help my team with the Hindenburg. Basically, we need to secure some kills, and we need to get rid of their northern presence so that we can deal with all the people they have in our spawn. The volley is decent. I mean, it could always have been better, but it helps. The Minotaur smokes up and starts punishing me. And that's perfectly okay, because once again, our spotter plane is ready. There's a reason I use spotter plane, and it's to be able to punish these kinds of moves. I track down where his shells are coming from. I aim slightly below them, right between them, and I'm eating some pretty big chunks of damage from the Hindenburg mostly, but ultimately the shot is worth it because that's the third citadel I've shot on this guy while he's been sitting in a smoke. In fact, all the damage I've done to that guy has been while he's been in a smoke. So that's really an example of how the spotter plane completely shits on Royal Navy cruisers, and why I've never really considered Royal Navy cruisers to be particularly overpowered in any way, because if you're good at smoke firing, you can punish them extremely heavily. In this case though, with the Hindenburg about to go down, well, wow, I hit him, but no damage. Well, that's pretty lucky. But he should be going down. With the Hindenburg down and a Des Moines pushing against 2 DDs, we should be able to push this northern side. So at this point, there's no point for me to really flee anymore. Or, like, kite away from these conquerors. I can start taking the fight, because my team doesn't need my help pushing the north side anymore. They should be able to do it themselves. So I start slowing down, and I start harassing this conqueror. There's a risk I might ground here, but I'm not really too bothered, because it's more important that I remain angled than that I avoid grounding. Because if I start turning hard left right now, I open up the possibility of citadels from this conqueror. But sitting angled like this, I mean, sure, he can kill me eventually, but... Oh, hello, Ognovoy. The Ognovoy has been chasing me the entire game. He's finally caught up to me. But my spotter plane, which was in the air, spotted him. That's, of course, another advantage of the spotter plane, and I instantly punish him for it. It's unlikely he launched torps, because, well, he didn't have time to show broadside as I shot him. So I'm not too worried about any incoming torpedoes. In fact, I really like this position right now. I'm undetected, but I'm still able to deal damage to this conqueror. More importantly, if this conqueror tries to rush me, he puts himself into a crossfire. I'm pinging my Yamato. I want my Yamato to push in towards me, so that we can create a crossfire. The Yamato is pretty damn far away. He is close enough that the conqueror does turn for him, and that's of course exactly what I wanted. Full broadside at 10.6 km. And Dispersion trolls me, and of course Conqueror Lowered Citadel trolls me. 3 overpens, not a single penetration, 4000 damage. That kinda sucks, because I thought my aim was pretty good as well, but I just got pretty damn trolled by, well, Royal Navy battleships. However, he is still giving a lot of broadside, and I get a second chance to punish him. Let's see if our aim works or dispersion works a bit better this time, and the follow-up volley does deal 17.5k. Which is of course nice until he pops his heel. So this problem is still not dealt with. However, the Yamato and Moskva presence is prompting this guy to angle very heavily towards them, and of course I'm more than happy to exploit this and try to punish his broadside here as he tries to disengage. I aim a bit higher since he is sailing away from me, but he's still giving so much broadside that the damage should be very good. And a 24-25k damage volley this time, much better than the first horrible volley that we got. And at this point I'm disengaging, or I don't really care about him anymore, since he's obviously going to die. He's used his heal and I chunked out almost all his health. So this game is at this point pretty clearly a victory. The Conqueror is about to go down, unless of course he pops his super heal. Oh, there we go. He's tanking a Des Moines and a Loyang and everything else and still out healing them. That is of course Conqueror in a nutshell. But his position is so bad that it's unlikely he's going to be able to disengage and survive it. So this game is at this point pretty clearly won. And this was an example of kind of sticking with your team. Like, I was always a part of the team. Now, I intentionally let myself sag behind the team, not because I was worried about pushing in, but more that because I was worried about what the enemy team might do if they caught up to us. So this was like kind of a kiting game, just constantly harassing the team as they tried to push into us, and constantly making them aware that if they rush too heavily, I will be there to punish them. And even though my team did go to D, and even though my Yamato positioning was pretty questionable, maintaining that really central position in a battleship is so important. You noted that almost the entire game I was between B and C. Like, from start to finish, I played around B and C. Like, from the entire game. And that's very important because that position is central. It's right smack dab in the middle of the map. and when you're in the middle of the map, you can pretty much shoot anything. The difference is, especially on north, when you sit in that position, you also have island cover, so you can disengage when you need to. There's a difference between being in a central position and being in the open, and being in a central position and being near island cover. And this was an example of holding a very, very central position, but at the same time, never really being in too much of a risk. I was never worried about dying this game. Like very comfortable health pool, a solid amount of tanking. I mean, I got my dreadnought, as you see. That means I tanked 120% of my health, but I was never worried for a second during this game. It was like a very confident, comfortable game in that sense. Team score wise, almost 3000 base XP. I did do quite a lot of damage. What was it? Let me actually check. 232,000 damage. And of course, I both damaged the DDs and the Minotaur, which is a good source of additional XP. In fact, if we move on and look on the detailed report, 93 shell hits, 288 shots fired, 69,000 damage done to the Minotaur alone. And that's pretty amusing considering I shot him pretty much only when he was smoked up, or I hit him only when he was smoked up. So that's just how much damage you can deal to a smoked up target using that spotter plane. Potential damage, only 1.5 million, not really that much. But then again, I was absorbing Conqueror hits, and it's kind of hard to get potential damage when Conqueror is shooting you, because when he shoots HE, he's always going to be dealing damage. Whereas if he shoots AP and you bounce it, you get a lot of potential damage, but you don't take any real raw damage. Whereas when he shoots HE, you take the raw damage pretty much every time, regardless of your angling. Anyway, this was my second Montana commentary. In this one we focused a bit more on the spotter plane and its uses. I have featured it before, but it's especially strong on the Montana, so I figured this was a pretty good example of just how useful that tool can be. Anyway, that was all for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.